Hello, everyone. Hello, people who are attending. Welcome to this wonderful session, which has been organized by News Laundry in collaboration with Logically. And this is going to be a workshop, which is going to be on fact checking. And I have already seen the presentation that the Logically team has so kindly prepared for us today. And I'm pretty excited about this because when this was first sent to me, ki, will you moderate this? And they told me what Logically does. I was like, oh, yes, because I've been obsessed with QAnon lately. And then the obsession led to Justice for SSR as well. And it's amusing and also very scary. So it is a mix of both. But once you start going down that rabbit hole, there is no really direction where you're going and where you're going to come out of. So it's I think just these sort of conspiracy theories have become like nightmares for fact checkers. And I think Logically is one of those people which might have answers for it if I'm not putting it incorrectly. So I'm looking forward to what you guys have to share with us in today's session. I'll just quickly ask you guys to first introduce yourself and also Logically. So I'll start with Lyric. Lyric, if you can just introduce yourself and what Logically does.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for having us here, Meghnad. I'm Lyric. I'm the founder and CEO of Logically, and we fight misinformation at scale around the world. Kind of when people talk about misinformation, they might sometimes make the mistake of saying, "Hey, it's a simple problem. It's up to the platforms, Facebook, Google, Twitter. They'll deal with it somehow." And really, it isn't. At the end of the day, consumers of information need to know what they can trust and what they can't. When people have an agenda behind information that's coming in front of them. Newsrooms have a stake because increasingly hyperpartisan and unreliable content is more effectively monetized than reliable investigative journalism. Governments are a stakeholder because of the sheer degree at which public safety, national security, and even public health in times of COVID could be impacted by misinformation. So we work across those groups of stakeholders, consumers with our Logically app and browser extension, newsrooms with our fact-checking as a service proposition, platforms and governments during election times, as well as during COVID, to identify all of these misinformation and disinformation threats and figure out what we can do about it, from fact-checking to takedowns. So I'm joined by a couple of colleagues from the Logically team, and I'll first pass it on to Devika.
Hi, I'm Devika. I'm a senior fact checker at Logically, and obviously as my role, I am basically trying to debunk misinformation, disinformation, and any kind of conspiracy theory that comes our way every day. And in today's session, I'm going to talk about what Logically does in terms of fact checking and how fact checking works at Logically. And now I'll pass this on to Sagar.
Thanks, Devika. Hi, everyone. My name is Sagar, and I'm the VP Operation for India. And my main job is to understand the ecosystem of misinformation and disinformation out here, and then to see how we can use the cutting edge technology that Logically has to curb this problem out here, with being in partnership with the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Again, as I said, I'm very excited and looking forward to what you have to say. Some house rules for the people who are attending. We will do a Q&A session a little towards the end. There is a Q&A toolbar which is active there, so you can ask your questions throughout the session, and then we will take some and answer them in the end. Please, I recommend everyone to look at the Q&A section once, because you can vote on which is the question that should be answered first. So the ones that are at the top will be answered first based on how many people want answers for it. So that is one. And second is we are recording this. This will be available on our YouTube channel as well later for you to watch and share with other people. And we are going to do this as a workshop format. Now, what does that mean is that this is not like a simple webinar. It is going to be a first round of just very basic questions that I have for these wonderful people here. And after that, we are going to move on to a presentation from the Logically team. And then after that, we are going to go into a general discussion with you based on your questions. And of course, you can also step in and give your opinions on the chat on the side as well. The one opinion that I can see, which I will read right off the bat because I think it's funny, is this is a very easy topic, doesn't need a webinar. Just go to Amit Malviya's timeline and see it listed there. Very funny, very funny, Mantosh. But we will start off with first, I think I just have a very, very basic question. Let's go from there. What are facts, right? Because as the saying goes, which a friend of ours from News Laundry has made famous, facts are not facts. But I will first go to Devika to answer this because she's a fact checker. What are facts?
So facts is basically anything that is true, anything that can be backed with evidence, hard data, and something that cannot be disputed logically. And I use that word logically here very intentionally. So it must not be disputed, it cannot be disputed. It's not an opinion. I think a lot of people confuse facts with opinions, and that's not true. Facts is anything that is backed by evidence.
Okay, but then when you say facts are something that is backed by evidence, can you go a little further? What sort of evidence, and what would say that that evidence is also a fact, maybe?
So I think, so let me take an example for this. So I think over the past few months, all fact-checking organizations have been involved in debunking news around coronavirus. And when I talk about something that's backed by facts and hard data, I mean things that are coming out, information that's coming out of legitimate sources. So it's going to be something that's coming out of, let's say, John Hopkins University, or something that's coming out of WHO. But I'm not going to go on YouTube and going to go on some random channel and believe the information that they're sharing.
Yeah.
So everything has to come from experts. You cannot believe what a layman is saying. You shouldn't trust your most trusted peers. You can't. You have to question the information that you're receiving. So that is basically very, very important.
Right. So, so I did I did a fellowship called LAMP, okay, in 2011, which is Legislative Assistance to Members of Parliament. And the first thing that they taught us was to look at primary sources, right? And they said the easiest thing for you to do is go to Wikipedia and look at it, but do not do that. The first rule is do not go to Wikipedia and look up information, because if anybody can write anything, obviously, and just, you know, with sources or whatever. Now that they taught us very rigorously how to look at primary sources, right? So one thing, obviously, because we were working with members of parliament, the first way to look at it is whether the government has said it, whether the government has given some data about it. And then based on that, they could say things in parliament, for instance, right? And in parliament, of course, it's very serious, because if you're caught spreading lies in parliament, there are very real consequences to it. But when it comes to other things, like for instance, you said YouTube channels, right? I can start a YouTube channel and tomorrow basically say Johns Hopkins University has said XYZ virus is the best virus in the universe, or sorry, vaccine in the universe. Nobody will really go and check at John Hopkins, right? But then how do you stop that? Also, please, guys, Lyric and Sagar, if you want to jump in at any point, please go right ahead.
Sure, perhaps I'll jump in for this one.
Yeah.
I think there's various levels of sources that we can access, right? That, as you've established, there are primary sources, there are databases and data sets and statistics that various governments release. And just focusing on that one example, do we know the exact methodologies behind how that data was collected? In some countries around the world, statistics, data departments, etc., are very independent of any government and any ruling party, and there's statistics that are made very accessible to machines and to the general public. In other countries, that's less so the case, and kind of even statistics can be produced to fit certain narratives. So in that kind of environment, how do we understand who can be trusted and who can't? I think that's where expert communities come in. It's established kind of experts in various fields, in cross-disciplinary fields. What are they saying and how are they analyzing various bits of information? Again, expert communities aren't easy to analyze. Sometimes they're agenda-driven themselves. So it really is a very complex skill, I want to say, because it's not a pure art and it's not a pure science. It's something. It's a combination of the two, and through that mechanism, we need to be able to define who we can trust, who has credible domain expertise, and to an extent is not agenda driven, and how are they analyzing a particular piece of information, and not just trusting one expert across time, over time, how does consensus develop? Kind of following the scientific method, right? Initially, there's some kind of hypothesis, experimental data, some reputable individual or not so reputable individual comes up with a theory, and it's up to the peer community to destroy whatever that theory is, in effect. So this is what was happening in the early days of COVID, for example, where there were so many theories flying around. To a lot of people, to the arm army, for the lack of a better word, that was like, hey, who are these experts? All these contradictory things. But for someone with a training in science, that was the scientific method. That was the beauty of the scientific method playing itself out in the public eye. Many people constructing various bits of analysis through various different lenses, and over time, consensus emerged around what the most trustworthy and believable narrative is, and what the most kind of established theory is. So I think all of these things are transient to a degree, and we need, first of all, a degree of understanding that this is a complex problem. It's not as simple as, hey, let's just go to the government statistics department and see what they're saying. It's diving below a layer, looking at agendas, and looking at seeing who various expert communities are, and where kind of their discussion lies.
I'm just going to I just want to add to this. You know, it's I think this whole fact checking say business, I'll call it a business, or but like a methodology, or like just as a profession, came up because of the internet, right? Because of the spread of the information at the pace that it spreads, at the pace misinformation spreads, etc. And I often now get philosophical about these things for obvious reasons, is because at the surface you think, yeah, I mean, they will look at something which is, you know, in the mainstream, they will go back, they will apply some sort of methodology, as you pointed out, scientific methodology, some like they will look at multiple sources, which is a journalistic exercise also to a large extent, and then they would come up with an answer that whether this information is correct or not. On the surface level, it seems it's as easy as that. But then, as you said, now we live in a time where you can't even trust that, because I mean, there are now basically cases where even every primary source can be agenda driven, can be planted, can be whatever. I will give you one small example of what happened recently. We have done a report on this on News Laundry as well, on the farmers' protest. There were these news reports coming up about pro-farmer farmers, pro-farm law farmers. Later, when we dug in, we found out that the government had supplied names of farmers who will speak pro-farm law, right? And then the media houses carried it, saying that, oh, this is our ground report, and they would put it as a bureau report, right? Now, it's really difficult for a layman to go down to say whether this is a true opinion or whether this was planted or what is going on. So Sagar, Devika, or Lyric, anybody, can you tell me how a layman can have like some sort of filters which can be applied?
Sure, I'll take this one. Yes, it's, well, you're effectively selling Logically for us in some ways, but again, outside of Logically, I think the real long-term solution here is education, media literacy, digital literacy, all those good things that everyone speaks about, but very little tends to happen. But in terms of simple filters, ones by Logically or by other organizations that can be applied, is looking at media sources and looking at how historically reliable they've been, especially around certain topics. Do they tend to be kind of left-leaning, right-leaning, for example? That is a form of agenda, or do they have different forms of agenda? Do they tend to be pro-incumbency, anti-incumbency? There's various other forms. So it's simple cues that you can get while you're consuming information, whether it's on your mobile device or on your desktop, that kind of alert you to the fact that, hey, this is a slightly dodgy source. That there are cases where it's not even that nuanced, where it's completely black and white. It isn't in the gray area of bias. It's, hey, this is explicitly a website that's been created by the propaganda arm of, say, a government or a political party. And those are really easy warnings that can be flashed in front of people. Other tools, I think these days, fact-checking is scaling up as an industry, and there's a dozen or so fact-checking organizations based here in India, and almost 100, I want to say, around the world. And it's an industry that has blown up because of everything we've seen evolve over the last 4 years. But I'm actually going to try and fact-check you on your statement that fact-checking really came into place then. Really. This was a sub-editing function back in the day. It was the role of sub-editors to ensure that any information that a newspaper or a media house was putting out was accurate. Otherwise, the news outlet would be held legally responsible for it, or their reputation would be on the line. But as kind of the commercial model of journalism and newsrooms has changed, that function completely got gutted. So some of what we're seeing is a reaction to that, but okay, we appreciate that economics change and business models change. So how do we make fact checking at industry scale kind of economically effective and kind of, again, for lack of a better word, cheap enough so that everyone can do it, every journalist, every newsroom can do it for everything that they're putting out? Because at the end of the day, no newsroom in the world wants to be called out for things that it gets wrong. And if there's an easy way that allows them to do that, I think that is somewhere where we're then working towards a long-term solution.
It's funny you say this, that no newsroom wants to be called out for what they're putting out. The called out part is important, because a lot of news channels now do not care of what they're putting out, and they just don't want to be called out for it though. So that's an important distinction there. I am just going to ask one very last question, and then we can move on to the presentation as well. Can you talk a little bit about large scale conspiracies, right? To set some context for the people who are watching, in case you don't know what a QAnon is or a Justice for SSR is. What happens is that one conspiracy theory, like say moon landing did not ever happen, or something like all leaders are lizards, like things like that, of a lizard race who are trying to control us. What is happening is because of this internet, because of the internet, now a lot of people are connecting these conspiracy theories with one another, and then finding that, oh, my conspiracy theory can be legitimized by another conspiracy theory. So it can be like lizard people are the ones who did not make the moon landing happen. So then that becomes a one thing, and then another piece will come in from somewhere, and this just snowballs into this gigantic net of conspiracy theory, which becomes like, oh, Democrats are basically blood-sucking, baby-eating, whatever, who are doing everything they can to harm humanity, while Donald Trump is fighting them. That is basically QAnon. On the other hand, Justice for SSR is similar now, where I have seen the same patterns happening with Justice for SSR, where people are saying Sushant Singh Rajput was murdered, and then it escalates into, oh, there was a live stream of his murder on the deep web where Karan Johar was watching or whatever. So it just escalates to like next level. A, why does this happen? And B, can you detect this, and how do we get rid of this?
Oh, we're sick people. We discovered the internet way too early. that's the reason. But no, I think it's when you think about conspiracies, historically, it was that kind of thing. It was, hey, 9/11's an inside job. or the Queen's an alien, kind of those were kind of conspiracies that were kind of very self-contained, very anti-authority, very, hey, there's some kind of global conspiracy like the Illuminati. They were somewhat independent. There was some similar themes of kind of distrust of large existing institutions, which again is somewhat warranted because every now and then big institutions do abuse their powers. So I'm not going to completely say conspiracy theorists have no right to question big institutions, because yes, big institutions do get things wrong. They are involved in conspiracies every now and then, but certainly nothing to the scale of what their minds and their own paranoia is forcing them to believe. QAnon is a great example. It's a conspiracy that is as bizarre as it sounds. It's that Donald Trump is this pedophile hunter and is going to bring all the Democrats to justice. Everything seems to revolve around Trump being the hero figure and this mysterious figure, Q, who supposedly is within military intelligence, but is likely not. So is yes, similar narrative here in India around the SSR case.
And in this case, the hero is Arnab Goswami. So
of course,
that is also one thing. Yeah.
Yes. So it's interesting because how do we combat this? And what does combating this look like? Does it mean we've got to go in and find ways of educating these people and changing their minds? Or is winning simply limiting harm? Really, changing a conspiracy theorist's mind is very difficult. I think when I was in Mumbai last year and we did these workshops in J schools, and I took on the role of a conspiracy theorist. I think I was a flat earther. The Netflix documentary had just come out.
Yeah.
And I took that extreme position, and the whole classroom, multiple times, they weren't able to convince me that I wasn't, because behind every point someone's likely to make, there's a whole encyclopedia of information, of so-called information, so-called reliable information, of alternative facts that back up and counter any argument a sensible person is likely to make. So it's very, very difficult. The only real way that research has shown is any helpful is getting ex-conspiracy theorists to talk to conspiracy theorists, or kind of having a real physical setting in which two people who trust each other can have a dialogue. In our opinion, I think the bigger win and the more immediate win for us would be finding a way of limiting these audiences and making sure that these aren't able to recruit more people into their conspiracies, and B, that they don't this digital conspiracy doesn't translate into real world harm. There's been so many cases of that now. Kind of people have been murdered over WhatsApp threads because of WhatsApp threads. People in the UK, for example, they took down critical national infrastructure around 5G because a Roman conspiracy around 5G and COVID started circulating. So in our view, I think that's really the immediate goalpost. While kind of institutions, education, and kind of probably psychology researchers dive into how we can get kind of some of these conspiracy theorist communities into normal thinking, I guess.
Yeah.
How do we tackle the problem of recruitment? Because QAnon is a great example. One of the aggregators that we published a report on until from April to September had something like 10 million visitors. And their following really grew. This was an aggregator set up deliberately to kind of make QAnon seem more normal than it is.
Yeah.
Historically, Q posts were available on 8kun, which is this really weird corner of the internet next to some very unpleasant information. But this guy, he had the great idea that, hey, let's make this all pleasant. Let's just have Q information in one place. And there's many of these aggregators that since popped up. And it's an attempt to recruit more people, perhaps less extreme people, perhaps people who are feeling marginalized because of various socioeconomic factors. And I think that's the area where we as individuals, platforms, governments need to really do some work to prevent that recruitment.
It's very interesting because in the recent elections, I think one senator was also elected who openly said that she believed in this QAnon conspiracy, and a bunch of them have also expressed support for it. So these consequences are very real, and like it's not like limited to like internet trolls or conspiracy bloggers anymore. With Justice for SSR also, we saw that it was a little different in a way that our entire media ecosystem was actually fanning this whole conspiracy theory sort of network, and going from drugs to black magic to kya khate hai, and whether they have indigestion, and then therefore this happened. I don't know like what levels it went to, but it's crazy how this is happening. But this is my cue to actually go into your presentation. Guys, please keep the questions coming. I am reading them. And also, anybody who is not asking a question, I recommend you look at the questions and vote on it. So people who have just joined in. And also, one comment that came in right now is that there have to be consequences to be called out, or they might not care. I think that's also very important to note here, which I hope you can get into at some point. But on to you, the presentation. Yes.
Brilliant. So I'll kick us off. Again, most of what we're going to cover here is really a quick intro into what we do. We've already done a bit of that, and I'll hand it over to Devika to talk about fact checking and how we fact check in particular, and also to Sagar around what we're doing specifically over the next few months. Could you go on to the next slide, please? So I've already explained part of who we are, a bit of background around maybe why you want to consider listening to us. We've been in the game for what seems like donkey's years, but it's been 3-4 years since we first got started. We're now around a 100-person team split across the UK and India, and a small team as well in the US, where we fight misinformation. Half of our team are experts in content analysis and in OSINT. So that's our fact-checking team and our open source intelligence analyst team. And the other half of our team almost is kind of technologists, data scientists, engineers, who try and find ways in which the work that our experts, our human experts, do can be scaled up. How do we make it easier for our teams to do the work that they do? And how do we amplify their impact? Next slide, please. A bunch of logos here are thrown on the screen around some of the reports and investigations that we've done globally. We've worked across 3 or 4 elections now in India and the US, as well as Sweden. And we're accredited by the IFCN, which many other fact-checking organizations in India are accredited by. We have an app called Logically, very creatively named, that allows you to access media content in what we like to think is a reliable manner, as well as a on-demand automated fact-checking service. So if you forward us any bits of information from WhatsApp or your browser or Facebook, it automatically puts it through a fact-checking process and presents you with some evidences to help make up your mind. And if those automated evidences don't solve your problem, you can share that fact check with one of our fact-checking team, and they'll respond to you. The next slide, please. I think we've covered this already, so we'll swiftly move on. Alrighty, so I briefly mentioned kind of some of the people that we work with, and I've been reliably informed that our attendees today are some very interesting stakeholders. So there might be some just media consumers who might be interested in our app and browser extension. We have our fact-checking as a service proposition for newsrooms and journalists if they want to play with some of our toys and learn around how we fact-check information. And more generally, for anyone interested in combating misinformation and disinformation institutionally, we have our intelligence and brand safety platforms that we've deployed as recently as the US election. So we worked with the battleground state and some federal agencies to combat both domestic misinformation as well as foreign interference, which increasingly is a large challenge and a huge complication when it comes to the disinformation landscape. I'll take a slight tangent just to scare you guys slightly. Over the last year alone, around $3.5 billion has been spent by various nation-state actors on the creation of what they call influence operations. So these are basically propaganda and disinformation campaigns operating outside of their own countries to try and influence other countries. There's probably 3 or 4 countries that are very adept at doing that. A couple of our noisy neighbors, as well as Russia and Iran. And yeah, if you want some bedtime reading tonight and really want to scare yourself around how we might be influenced, not just by our own governments, but by other countries, do have a look into the information warfare space. I think I've scared you guys enough, and I'll hand it off now to Sagar to talk about some of the work that we have ongoing in India. The next slide, please.
Thanks, Lyric. So, as the first question that you asked, Megan, was what's fact? And with our India plan is to provide fact to people so that they have trust in news. So that is the most important part that that we are looking forward to. Apart from that, we are looking to work with governments, work with newsrooms, work with stakeholders in the rollout of COVID vaccine that is going to happen. Already have seen a lot of misinformation coming, right now, at least from UK, wherein we had the first female who had the vaccine. And now we are looking at that misinformation that, these are the negative effects of if you are going to have this vaccine. So moving forward, once that rollout happens into India, we will see a lot of that misinformation, and we want to be prepared in order to deal with that, to handle that. And we are, reaching out to stakeholders, we are reaching out to governments, state governments. Apart from that, we are looking to, again, partner with government entities. We have elections coming around next year. We have state elections happening. We have seen previously when we did the 2019 general election, the sort of misinformation that was out there, logically, sifted through closely, close to 1 million, pieces of content, that is articles, blogs, the different content pieces, which mostly were disinformation and misinformation. And some of them were coming from outside of the country. It was not just the state actors. We had non-state actors. We will be looking at the coordinated inauthentic behavior, which is becoming a huge problem. It's not just about the false information, but then it's about the intent that is behind that false information. And then India, since we don't have one single language, it's not about English or it's not just about Hindi. We have scores of languages, spreading all across, the states and everything. So our next big plan for India would be to, develop Telugu, Bengali, Kannada, Hindi and Marathi capacities. We already have Hindi and Marathi. We will be, trying to include Telugu, Bengali, and Kannada, so that the fact checks, the automated fact checks that we are doing becomes easier. So when, once a user sends us that query or that content piece that he feels is not correct, we would want the automation to help initially so that it's faster. If it does not, then, it goes to our human fact checkers, and they should be able to provide them with solutions. And then finally, the most important thing for us is to increase the capabilities of our fact checks, decrease the time it takes for, for anyone, a newsroom for that matter, to do a fact check. If we are able to minimize that time, that means the amount of damage that it can do over a certain period of threshold, if we are able to minimize that, then we can say to some extent that we will be able to, counter this disinformation campaign that is being run. So we might make a dent in this whole ecosystem of fake news. So these are the things that we are, looking to implement in India. And now over to Devika. Thank you. Next slide.
So, hi everyone. As a fact checker, over the next few slides, I'm going to take you through how we fact check at Logically. And I will also tell you what makes fact checking at Logically extremely unique and different from other fact checking organizations. So we basically have a large team of dedicated fact checkers who are basically receiving training on a regular basis. They receive training in various investigative tools, in how to identify credible information, how to also filter through disinformation and misinformation that they see online. Now, one of the biggest questions that have always been asked, at least to me, is you are a human being with biases. So how are you going to remove biases from the fact checks that you're presenting? Now, here at Logically, we do three things to make sure that none of our fact checks have biases in them. All our checks go through an editorial quality assurance process. They go through 3 stages of scrutiny. That basically means that every fact check is actually looked at by 3 people. So that basically any kind of bias that might seep in the first stage or second stage is filtered out. And whatever we're presenting at the end is driven by data and hard evidence. Nothing that we're going to say is based on any kind of opinions, any kind of thing that we have just read. Everything goes under scrutiny. And I think the third and the most important bit is, because we have an app where users can submit their fact checks to us, we basically receive a random fact check sometimes. And the randomness of our fact checks actually helps us in reducing the risk of biases. And I think that's really important. For any fact checker, you have to make sure that your biases don't seep in, and we go through these stages that Logically to make sure that whatever we're presenting is backed by data. Now, coming to what makes us extremely unique, it's basically the AI tools that our large team of world-class data scientists are almost every single day innovating, developing to enable fact checkers. And these AI tools are embedded in our fact-checking process. And this basically really helps us in increase efficiency and decrease our turnaround time. As you said before, that misinformation spreads at an extremely fast pace. And because of these AI tools that we're constantly working on and integrating in our processes, we are trying to tackle disinformation, misinformation at a speed which hasn't been done before. Now I'm going to take you through a few AI pipelines that we have developed in the last couple of months, and how we are using them to increase our efficiency. So over the last few months, we have been constantly developing a lot of AI tools, and we took on the daunting task of live fact checking the presidential debates. Was extremely, and I was a massive part of that project, and I can say that it was extremely difficult to do that with the constant interruptions and the constant kind of debates that were going on, and everything that was happening. It was just not easy, and I'm so glad for that mute button. It made our life easier. But to give you an idea of what we do is, so to take you through a couple of AI pipelines that we develop and how they help us. So the first is evidence retrieval. Now, this is actually my favorite tool that we've developed, and it helps us so much. So what evidence retrieval does is, when we receive a claim, evidence retrieval matches that claim against data from thousands of credible news organizations and newsrooms and everything out there, and provides us with results that basically helps us in either support or refute the claim. So what it essentially does is, it basically eliminates the need for us to do any kind of independent Googling or searching or going through tedious amount of information. This tool basically gives us information in front of us that we can just go through and give our users with an extremely reliable judgment. So that is obviously my favorite tool, because it's really decreased our turnaround time.
Automated Googling.
What?
Automated Googling. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So everything is just given to us on our dashboard. Second is fact matching, which is also really cool, to be honest. So what fact matching does is, again, when we receive claims, fact matching, this pipeline basically matches that claim against the large database of previously checked claims by different fact checking organizations, including ours. So what it does is, if today I get a claim which says COVID is a hoax, then this is basically going to give me information from all organizations, including Logically. It's going to throw data at me from Full Fact and from FactCheck.org and everything. And this basically, what it does is, it reduces or completely eliminates the need of duplication of effort. I'm not going and doing in doing my research from scratch and helps me provide answers to our fact checkers in an extremely quick time. So that really helps us. And third is speech to text pipeline. Now this is really cool, and we are basically in the process of implementing this further. So we developed this specifically for the US elections. And what it did was, when participants and moderators started speaking, this pipeline, as the name suggests, converted speech into text. So this pipeline can convert any audio into text. And this pipeline was paired with something called claim extraction pipeline. And that extracted claims from the text that was being converted. So what it did for us was that we basically did not have to watch the debate. We did not have to manually extract claims, and we could check what they were saying while the debate was going on. So to put this in perspective, over the course of 3 debates, our pipeline extracted about, I think, 100 fact checks, and we checked 60 of them while the debate was going on.
Wow.
So it was a massive success for us. And then with the success of that entire program, we decided to subsequently integrate these tools into our everyday process. And what it's done is it's basically not only improved the quality of checks, but also the quantity of checks. So we can basically now check more fact checks in an extremely short amount of time. And that is really helpful. And that's why AI is, I think, really cool. And we can basically debunk misinformation faster than we could previously. Now, even though we have these tools, I'm not going to say that fact checking is easy. It comes with its own set of challenges to a fact checker, and challenges are also very unique to each country. So I'm going to, in this slide, talk a little bit about why fact checking is actually challenging in India. So as Sagar said before, that obviously India is the most diverse country in the world. It has the 2nd largest population. It has over 100 main languages that eventually have about 1,000 dialects. So what that happens is misinformation is spreading in hundreds of languages, which makes it extremely hard for us to actually control and track and trace where misinformation starts from, where it's spreading. Obviously, not one person can know all these languages. So huge amount of sources and linguistic capabilities are required to actually debunk misinformation from all corners of India. After that, secondly, we know that, we are the biggest users of WhatsApp. There are 400 million people in India who use WhatsApp, and this number is increasing every single day. We also have one of the highest populations in the world who are using other social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram. And all of these platforms have encrypted text and closed groups, which is extremely which is next to impossible, in my opinion, to penetrate because of data security. So, and these things are rife with misinformation. So how do you track and trace those? That has, all your WhatsApp forwards that you're getting on your family groups, which are extremely questionable. We want to trace them, we just don't know how. We want to track them, we want to control them. And I think next thing that is a problem for India and a lot of 3rd world countries is that our illiteracy rate and our unemployment rate is extremely high. Everyone in the villages today have access to phone, and they're looking at WhatsApp, and they're looking at different videos that are coming to them. But because of, I think, low level of literacy, they don't have that awareness where they're going to question that information. A lot of times you ask people, where did you get this information from? They'll be like, "Arey, hamari dost ne bola." So these trusted peers play a really big role in actually spreading misinformation and saying things. I heard from this person that this is going to happen. So that leads to a massive issue in India. And I think what basically the way to actually tackle this in India, which isn't happening at the moment, is that fact checking is still developing. It's relatively new in India, at least. And a lot of fact checking is still not a part of your mainstream journalism. A lot of big mainstream media houses that actually have the resources to basically try and tackle misinformation each corner, they aren't basically putting those resources to use. They don't have that dedicated team of fact checkers that is going out and debunking misinformation. So these factors make fact checking extremely challenging in India. But while I'm talking about how fact checking is challenging in India, I would also talk about certain challenges that fact checkers face, not just in India, but across the world. And this is something that, at the end of the day, it's like, it is what it is, but we're going to keep doing our job. So the first thing is, obviously, it's been said before, is that misinformation spreads so quickly. I think there was a study that MIT that said that misinformation spreads 6 times faster on Twitter than truth does. And and by the time we get around to debunking misinformation, and that could take a couple of hours, even with our AI tools, if something hasn't been debunked before, I am saying hours, it can take up to days as well, because we have to make sure what we're saying is reliable. But at that time, we don't know how many people have gotten access to that misinformation. It must have spread to like thousands and lakhs of people. So the speed of misinformation, I think, is the biggest problem for any fact checker across the world. After that, it's okay, it's my job. You tell me something, it's my job as a fact checker to provide you with data. But can I really change your preconceived notions? Can I really tell you, no, you are not supposed to believe in this today, tomorrow you're going to believe in this? So, I'll do my job and I'll go around doing what I'm doing, but I really cannot penetrate anybody's thoughts and try and change them. It's just not going to happen. So I think that is also one of the biggest issues. And, we just have to sort of keep working and be persistent in providing facts and challenging what people think and what their preconceived notions are, and really saying that this is the data, this is the hard fact, believe in this. So that also becomes like a massive issue. And, so Lyric talked about digital literacy. So I think as a fact checker, we have a two-pronged responsibility. While I'm providing you with facts, I also need to tell you, you have to fact check yourself, which is something I'm telling everyone these days. The information that you're receiving, please question it. Please question your source. Please question anything that you are receiving. Do not just share blindly. The other day I had this, I had my father send me a video, and basically the video came with a claim that these are a set of Muslims getting beaten up in a platform in France for not wearing a mask. And I said, "Are you sure this is what the video is?" He's like, "Yeah, it's come from my friend, and I'm sure this is what it is." And I checked it. I basically did a reverse search on the thing, and it turns out it's a video from Hong Kong. The Hong Kong protests were going on. So it's just so easy to caption anything with anything. Just send it, and it's going to spread. And not everyone is going to.
Devika, sorry, a tiny interruption. I'm surprised your dad is still sending you anything at all, you being a fact checker.
He's now taking the initiative of checking it with me before he's spreading it.
That's
So
good.
that, after my months of nagging that don't send this,
Yeah.
it's finally coming to me. But this is, I think, the biggest thing. Anybody can turn around and be like, why should we believe you? Madam, who are you that you're also a human being who's full of biases? Why are we believing you? And especially this question is raised when what we're saying is not going to conform with their own political views or their like notions and beliefs in general. And like I said, we're not here to, but we are here to change people's opinions and stuff, but we can't force anybody to do that. Our job is to debunk misinformation, curtail the spread of misinformation, and give people reliable information that they can hopefully use and convert their thoughts to that.
That is actually the top question that has been asked also, that experts are people, they come with biases and prejudices. Is it possible to be non-agenda driven? So I think you've already answered that, but we'll come to that later if others also want to add to it. Go on.
And the last thing, I think, so this is something that I think not only is the need of the hour, but it should be done. I think this is what we're also trying to do it logically, is that we're trying to support the world of journalism to make sure that whatever information they're passing on is reliable. So how can a fact-checking organization basically help journalists? And I'll give you a couple of like points about how that can actually happen. So fact-checking, in my opinion, is more reactive journalism. You don't know when misinformation is going to start. Today, somebody tweeted something, somebody posted something on Facebook, and it just bursts into like 10,000 shares and lakhs of shares. So as a dedicated team of fact checkers, it's our job to monitor this misinformation, monitor information, And we also sort of, eventually develop this knack for sort of being like, this could turn into something dodgy. So I'm going to keep an eye on this. So, something like that, if that is coupled with a set of journalists who, let's say, focusing on covering some news or some information that's coming, a set of fact checkers can basically provide that journalist with extremely comprehensive and accurate and detailed report of what's going on. And I'm not going to say this only from one angle, but from a holistic point of view. I'm going to talk about they can monitor misinformation and the spread of that particular information on all social media platforms. And I think that's really important, and why these two things need to come together now. And one of the main things is that because we have the training and the skills and the tools to basically monitor this misinformation and monitor where misinformation is going to spread, and we have these investigative tools at our disposal, we can basically flag misinformation quickly. And especially with at Logically, the fact that we use artificial intelligence to do that, we know that we can scale our capability to tackling more information in like a very limited amount of time. So what I will end my session is by saying that I think fact checking needs to become a fundamental process of how anybody processes information. If you are reading information, if you are listening to anybody, you have to fact check yourself and that person. I think it needs to become a part of your daily dialogue and conversation. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I'm going to hand this over to Lyric.
Lyric, I will actually take it over from you, Zabardasti, now, because because there are a ton of questions and we are actually running out of time. Okay, so let's start with answering some questions. I think the first question, which Devika has already answered and in multiple ways. Experts are people, though, and come with biases and prejudices. Is it possible to be non-agenda driven? What does it look like? But I'm also going to take two other questions quickly with it. Information is very scarce at a local level. How to verify what is true? And the third one, which is how can a layman figure out institutional propaganda if a powerful institution is spreading BS through various channels like textbooks, social media, and civil society too? So one by one, please jump in.
Sure. Perhaps I'll take the first one around experts. I think let's even split that up. Kind of how, say, fact-checking experts are slightly different, and experts just out there in the wild, I'd probably answer that slightly different. When it comes to fact-checking, most international organizations look up to a body called the IFCN. It's the International Fact-Checking Network, and it sets the standards and processes for how organizations should go about fact-checking. So there's a degree of institutional credibility that comes from receiving that accreditation. But kind of digging deep into process-wise, how we can eliminate those biases. Part of that is the three levels of scrutiny that Devika was mentioning. In addition to that, we have, in fact, the algos, the AI. It looks at human judgments and sees what level of drift is occurring in them, and the humans look at AI bias and sees what level of drift is occurring. So AI and humans kind of keep each other accountable. There's also then this very interesting and transparent review process that we have. So everything that we publish can be questioned by all of our users. So just flag the report button, say why you disagree with our judgment, and we'll take it into due consideration and kind of within a reasonable time period, come back with why we don't change our judgment or why we will change our judgment. Because as time goes on, facts do evolve and kind of better information and high quality evidence does become available. So we're completely open to doing that. And I think there have been maybe 5 to 10 cases where we have done that over the last few years. On experts out there in the wild, I think this is where polling and looking at multiple experts is a really easy way of reducing individual biases that these experts might hold. And how do you make sure that someone's not agenda driven? I think if we do feel that someone's agenda driven, it would be important to get a narrative from whoever the other side of that agenda is, because usually these things are at least bipolar or have multiple poles attached to them. So as long as we're comprehensive in and not unreasonably selective in which experts we're choosing. I think that's a good system-wise approach of countering bias.
Yeah.
Yes, the other two, I'm open to someone else taking them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll take the last one. I do understand, like, how do you trust when some information is coming from government or like authorities in power and all. And that's why I said right at the start that that's why we are looking to establish partnerships with the stakeholders itself to understand these nitty-gritties, to understand what sort of communication is coming in and what is the opinion, the general opinion that public have. And then once we understand both the sides, and maybe after that we are able to come back with the facts that will be neutral in its approach, because that's what we are trying to do. We are neutral, we just present facts, we are not taking sides out here. And in order for us to do that, it's very important to establish these partnerships. So yeah, Devika, you have to add anything?
I'm just gonna say there are, as a layman, there are certain tricks that you can apply even when you come across some kind of information. So, a lot of posts now have the mark of paid or promoted, and the propaganda is extremely visible when you look at it.
Hmm.
So to give you an example, the other day I was on a website trying to look at some information, and that website hyperlinked another website as their source. When I clicked on that hyperlink, it took me to some random tabloid, which was not talking about what they're claiming. So I think it's very important that when you're looking at information, look for these tiny, things that are there. If your headline is all in caps, if your piece is riddled with errors, it's bound to not be reliable. It's very important to look at all the things that are also hyperlinked. And as a fact checker, like Sagar said, we're going to go out and get information, and we're not going to go out and get information from one perspective. We're going to try and give everybody a holistic view of what's going on along with facts. And I think that's really important, to put everything in perspective and context. So to also give you another example, a lot of people say that Donald Trump is saying something, and it's basically very, like, on the surface it's not true, but like when Joe Biden is saying something, it's very, it seems true. But there are also ways in which you have to put everything into context. You have to basically look at anybody's political history. You have to look at what kind of information, even like an organization is sharing. So context is everything, in my opinion. And when you take things out of context and share it, it can basically mislead anyone into believing anything.
One thing I wanted to add about institutional biases, information spread by institutions. One thing I have seen, and you guys can correct me if you have seen this as well. So when I was working in Parliament, there was this one tool which we had, like parliamentary questions, right? So every MP can ask a parliamentary question, and on a daily basis, when the Parliament is on, hundreds of questions are answered, and MPs basically ask anything and everything. And this is right from UFO sightings to use of goat milk to whatever comes to their head, they ask, right? And the government has to answer in a legitimate way. What I've seen happening now, especially, is that news reports are saying something, but when I go back to the parliamentary question related to it, it is saying something completely else. I tend to rely on the parliamentary question more, because obviously it's written down there and it's very official that they're responding to a member of parliament, and it is on record there, and they can be held liable for it. So what do you think, why does this happen? And if, say, one question which was asked is information is very scarce at a local level, that also will answer. But also for a layman who cannot do this whole process, what happens then?
Yeah, I think it's. Oh, sorry, Devika.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, over to you.
I was just gonna say that, to basically, what's really important here is when you're looking at a website or any kind of source, it's very important to figure out what their political leanings are. And it's not that difficult to figure that out. You just have to do a very quick Wikipedia search, and all the information is actually given to you. So once you have that piece of information, it's extremely, like I said, it's extremely easy to put what they're presenting into context. And you have to question what they're saying, even if they don't have, the resources to do what we can do. And on the other hand, I'm just going to say that's what we're here for. Send this information to us and we will check it for you and tell you whether this is true or not.
Yes, that's true. That's true. So guys, use logically and you will find out whether there is enough local information also. And we will see how robust their whole system is also. Then we'll test it out. देखते हैं क्या होता है.
Not all at once.
Yes, let's challenge them a little bit also. Because one thing about just general biases. This question comes to News Laundry a lot as well. Like, you have an agenda, you have biases. Every human being has biases, and which is true. I mean, everybody has biases, and everybody to a large extent also has an agenda because there's a bias. So I would, from my end, I would recommend people to also make people also acknowledge that they have a bias, right? I think that's also very important. So as Lyric pointed out, when you see there is an agenda or a particular leaning or a bias, the first step is for them to acknowledge that there is that bias so that you can look at another person who has an opposite bias. But then the first step is acknowledgement of that bias, right? And at News Laundry, we do this a lot, right? But at News Laundry, we are very open that, yeah, we are biased. Like, you ask me anything, I'll tell you my bias. Then you take your call whether you want to believe me or not, or challenge me accordingly. I think that is very important, and that sort of gets rid of a lot of your problems in one go, right? I just wanted to throw that in. We can take the next question. Don't you think in SSR case, the media and other online platforms brainwashed people to such an extent that even Ria turned out innocent? Many of them still aren't ready to believe what the truth is. Fake news paves its way when people are driven with emotions and their own perceptions. I think this is a very interesting question. Please, can someone take this?
Yeah, I'll take this one. This is very multiple reasons why we feel that might happen. I think, yes, there will be some organizations, and maybe especially fringe organizations and really kind of random sources that will have certain agendas to push, and it's only natural that they publish information a certain way to capture into the sensationalism. If it's sensationalist enough, it's going to get more traffic. If it's going to get more traffic, they're going to get paid better ad dollars. So there is a slightly convoluted commercial incentive, especially if it's a non-traditional newsroom. But even in a traditional newsroom, it turns out, guess who gets targeted by misinformation and disinformation most? Say you use Twitter. For any influence operation, be it by a political party or by a nation state actor, it's journalists. The aim of a lot of these disinformation campaigns isn't to reach the average Joe, to the Aam Aadmi. It's to reach journalists, because journalists have this massive megaphone in the newspapers that they write in, and in the TV channels that they appear on. It's narratives are deliberately crafted to get to a journalist, to make it interesting enough for them to publish a story and have enough kind of information and supposed evidence to back up and stand up any story. So journalists are an active target of influence operations, and there isn't enough awareness around this. There's a lot of campaigns we've identified, kind of, again, taking it away from the India context just to make it easier. Russian influence operations, they target specific journalists with certain partisan leanings based over in the States, because they know that they're going to agree with certain worldviews. There's a very easy framework: 2 truths, 1 lie, that we've seen quite a lot when it comes to Indian WhatsApp forwards as well. 2 kind of statements that they might be true, or they might just be statements that a journalist or any person in the audience might agree with, based on who they are, based on their demographics, psychographics, or previous publishing. And then there'll be a third thing that'll just push that boundary slightly, or they'll push this individual or organization's agenda. So this is a degree of complexity and kind of psychological resilience we're not used to. Like, most people aren't used to. And kind of, if I'd say there's a group of people that needs to be brought up to speed on this whole space, it is journalists, because active huge targets, say a Pakistani or a Chinese influence operation, or even a political party's information operation, it's going to reach what, 10,000 people, 100,000 people, maybe a million people, maybe 10 million people. But give it to targeted journalists in a major newsroom in India, it reaches 100 million people like that. So I think we really need to work on kind of upskilling and making sure that journalists are resilient to this attack, because it's a kind of cybersecurity attack almost, but with information. We really need we really need to do that desperately.
On the justice for SSR thing, I think, the one thing I would like to add to Lyric is with what we have seen, is that during pandemic, a few things happened. One was that a lot of traffic went towards news channels, because people were just sitting at home watching news channels. But also advertisement budgets were pulled from a lot of companies, right? So because they were trying to do cost cutting because of the low business, the first hit was the marketing budget, which means that a lot of people were watching, but ads were not coming. So the news channels were like in a tricky situation there. And that's the problem with the advertisement model. And here is where my cue is, where pay to keep news free, subscribe to News Laundry, and support independent media, because when the public pays, the public is served. So when this SSR thing blew up, because it had all the spicy, juicy elements that were there to sort of make the audience stick to the whole thing. Bollywood, celebrity, suicide, drugs, black magic, and they kept adding angles, right? To make it spicier and more masaledar, and it went to next level, right? Notice that they also got very random people on TV to say whatever they want, like bodyguard and security guy and pizza delivery guy suddenly was like, no, I'm actually a postman, or the postman is like, no, I'm actually a postman. So random things were happening on TV, but it made good TV. That's the whole point. Like, people were there, so ads were being sold to them in the process of them watching. So misinformation, I think, is also a big way to sell advertisement. And I think maybe you can also talk about this a little more, about how a lot of websites that sell misinformation are also extremely ad heavy, right? This is also one of the things that people have seen. So yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but that's the untalked about. We speak about people with agendas a lot, but it's simple. Some people just do for-profit disinformation because they know that sensationalist content is going to sell more ads. Again, this is to their credit, some good work that's happening in what people are calling the brand safety and brand suitability space, because even a brand, say, I don't know, I have a Bisleri bottle in front of me. So Bisleri, it doesn't want to be placed next to a QAnon thing or next to an SSR is related to adrenochrome and Q and all these kinds of things, because again, a lot of research has shown once those ads are appearing next to this problematic content, people kind of disassociate with those brands. So there's a commercial reason even for defunding disinformation. And really, the big ad networks need to step up, especially in India, because they've started making some adjustments over in the UK and the US, but India, it's relatively untouched. So huge point to bring up.
Okay, I'm just going to take one last question. I think this is an important one, but Binil, how exactly is fact-checking company a monetizable business, or will this go into the NGO segment, or fund will go to goodwill, like Alt News does, like donation based? So and with that we will end this, but this important question, if you can take up.
Yes, absolutely. So we're one of the few for-profit fact-checking organizations in the world. We think that that's really the only way for us to scale. And from day one, our aim has been to be an organization that scales in the space. So we appreciate like the awesome work that's been done by charities, nonprofits around the world in this space. But really, even with kind of 100 different organizations, it's still very much a cottage industry. So what we'd like to bring to the fact-checking world is the industrial revolution. It's how do we build an assembly line for fact-checking, same as kind of Henry Ford 70 odd years ago. How do we kind of build assistive robots so that fact checkers don't have to do everything? So that's a huge part of what we want to do in the fact checking industry. But fact checks have more value than people think. Yes, it's a media asset in that it helps people, but really, for all of the reasons that we mentioned, kind of public health, public safety, even platform trust and safety, fact checking is an operational requirement for all of these organizations. So that's where we are heading as a business, and that's why we fact check even when no one pays us to fact check, because by fact checking information, we know what's true and what's not true, and once we know what's true and what's not true, we can try and figure out who's behind promoting certain agendas. And once we have that understanding, we can kind of sell that intelligence to various stakeholders. So that's a real kind of 1 minute run through of what we do as a business.
Thank you so much, guys. This was wonderful. Logically is doing great work. I just checked out your website and everything. I was very highly impressed at how crazy this whole system has become. And to end, I would like to end on a note that if you click on enough Wikipedia pages, you will end up on the philosophy page. So ultimately, everything ends up with philosophy. So read more philosophy because it will help you think more critically and question everything. And I think the whole point of human existence is to question everything and try to find answers for it. Become a curious soul, try to find information where you can, and also fact check everything from multiple sources and use better sources. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for watching. And guys, just leave your contact information or wherever people can ask questions. There are a lot of questions, as you can see. So in case you want to answer some of them, please go ahead and tell them where they can reach you.
Yes, absolutely. It's Logically IN and Logically AI. Those are our handles across social media. And if you'd like to get in touch with one of us, we've got very boring email addresses. It's just our names followed by @logically.in. And yeah, we'd love to hear from as many of you as possible.
I can be reached on @Meghnad on Twitter and also Meghnad@newslaundry.com. So if you have anything to say to me about anything, please do write in. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for attending and see you.
Great.